everyone. Welcome to NX Office Hours. I got some extra music playing. Let me see if I can find it real quick. There you go. Apologies for that. Maybe Bram, while I'm finding this, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody. My name is B-Man. Thanks a lot, Zack and NX, for having me here. Introduction. I'm B-Man. I'm a software engineer. I'm in love with NX. I've been for the longest time that it's out there. Been using it for more than 3 years. I guess when it came out, I started using it right away. And huge fan. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, man. The honor is all mine. And there's Brandon. Hey, Brandon.
Brandon, good to see you, man.
Yeah. So we met each other way back when we were. So I noticed you on Twitter. You had posted this kind of meme about like this guy that would just code, and go back to sleep and then code. It was like NX was the inspiration to that, and I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And then I think we had you on my show and back and forth and stuff like that. But yeah, it's been so cool seeing the stuff you've been doing with NX recently, especially, and looking forward to talking a little bit about that. So for everyone else who's joining us, please feel free to ask any questions you might have in chat, and we'll look to address it. We do have one question that came in from prior to the show. I just wanted to answer that real quick. Hey, and Lars is here. Hey, Lars, how you doing, sir? So the question was actually about this. Let me share my screen. Let's add that in, like so. So the question was about this new Cypress feature called the Component Test Runner, new in 7.0. So the question was specifically, does NX have any plans to officially support this? And at the moment, so we're aware of this. We've been looking into it a little bit. We're actually still doing some investigation on how this might affect test time. So we'll see. It's on our radar. We're investigating it. If it's something you really are excited about or something you really want to see from NX, be sure to let us know. And that could influence our decisions a little bit around that. But yeah, it looks very interesting. Are you familiar with this, Bram?
No, I was curious if you could quickly run us by what's the component test runner. Well,
sure.
How is it different than the current Cypress, I guess?
Sure. So from what I understand about this, and I've read this article, that's about the extent of it at the moment. But so Cypress, when you run the end-to-end tests in Cypress, which is maybe you could think of it as Cypress Classic, spinning up a whole browser instance where the whole stack is essentially stood up. Mm-hmm. The idea for the component test runner is the component is mounted in isolation rather than the whole browser stack being stood up. And so you can kind of more isolate your tests this way. So
right.
It's kind of exciting. Noticeably, Angular is not present in the list of supported libraries out of the box, but React and Vue are. So interesting stuff to see there and see what it would take to get some Angular stuff up. So
very cool. Very nice.
Yeah. Mars is asking official support for WebDriver IO.
In NX, I guess.
Yeah, I'm not sure to be honest, Lars. I don't think so at the moment. Just because we've got a pretty full plate. So with all the things we're supporting at the moment. So yeah.
I guess Lars also is one of the people that's definitely able to build this themselves, which has been the NX go-to suggestion. Like, hey, if something's not there, go build it. We make it all pluggable.
Yeah, and we love the community contributions for sure. So anyone interested in these things or looking to as an alternative to Cypress, I think at the moment the only thing we plan to support for the long term would be Cypress first party. But of course, we're always open to plugins and especially to supporting and promoting other plugins that the community supports so that they're behind, which is a good segue into some of the stuff P-Man's been doing. So we were talking about, the first thing we wanted to talk about was the schema-driven workspaces we had been talking about before. So Bram, do you want to kind of introduce this concept to us?
Sure. So I think Before that, let's go quickly into NxPM stack specifically. So what I try to achieve with NxPM stack is basically taking away the first, 10, 20 hours of a project that I would always do in a very similar way. And as you probably also can relate to, being a developer, your habits kind of change over time, which means that if you build an app 6 months ago, and even if it's still your standard, there's little things that get different over time. And then within 6 months, you basically end up with an app that's quite different than what you started out with. I start a lot of greenfield projects, a lot of prototypes, a lot of new stuff. I try to be really fast in getting ideas out. So talking to a client about an idea, I don't want to have to worry about all the start. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of projects that set you up with something from scratch. So I could have also taken one of these projects, one of these approaches. Let's say, I guess WordPress would serve a lot of prototyping I could do, where I could just build a page, have a backend, or you could look at like maybe Contentful or Graph CMS to do these kind of things and build out front end. However, what I like to achieve is not just front end. I really like to build a working prototype that people can actually play around with and extend on. And then if they're serious about it, take to another level. And you probably can already guess this often doesn't really happen. So that's nice. We just build a prototype, we figure it out, we learn stuff, we build it into the next one. Right. So that's a typical cycle. And in order to facilitate this, I started NxPM Stack, which is basically a big set of schematics at this point, or generators if you want. But they're technically still schematics. It's NX10. And it kicks off one schematic and starts running in total about 50 schematics, or maybe even more, depending on your workspace. And it takes an NX workspace and it sets you up with Nest.js on the back end, Angular on the front end, and an Ionic mobile app as the mobile solution. So you really have a literal full stack, and it runs Prisma as the database layer. Comes with Docker Compose files, so it sets up your whole Docker environment. And as a cherry on top, I guess, when you push it to GitHub, there's a GitHub action configured. So it will, on first push, it will automatically start running your tests. So then it's up to you to actually start implementing these tests. And it has I guess, 5 steps to deploy to Heroku. So it's really a minimal setup, and I've been able to stand up projects in like an hour, fully working, authentication working, all that.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that's NxPM Stack.
Yeah. So to recap, this is like an opinionated stack that you've built via schematics to get you from create NX workspace to live full app with all the niceties of a stack that would come. Yeah. It's interesting. I was having a conversation recently with all the skills we need to learn as developers just to get to a base point. I feel like there's a similar kind of feature creep of projects that as we go on, as time goes on, it's like more, everyone expects GitHub Actions now. Everyone expects authentication out of the box. So yeah,
and I guess it's one of the only projects, at least to my knowledge, that offers an opinionated full stack workspace in NX. Like, besides the fact that I do a generation part, which is an interesting part by itself, which enables us a few things. We'll get back to that later. I'm not aware, and please, if they are, let me know. I'm not aware of any projects out there that like, hey, we got an NX workspace and we got an opinion on how to do stuff. And actually, the generators is nice, and setting up the start of the project, it's all cool and sweet, but you could do this with a template, and I could just maintain the template, and when I add something, I'm going to add it there. However, by offering stuff as a generator, after initial setup, I allow you to do exactly the same steps, but then with your opinion. So let's say you want to make a contact list. I want you to be able to express, hey, give me all the stuff needed for doing CRUD of a contact, and it will create the database layer, GraphQL endpoints, the GraphQL SDK, and the front end, and the admin UI. And this has really enabled me to work fast, plus a bunch of workspace generators, by the way, to just knock out features. And because the whole stack already has an opinion, and you also have to think less and less about naming things. which is great because these are the kind of struggles where you and I might differentiate. I think it's pretty nice to have like an opinionated way to do stuff, even if you don't really agree with this name yourself. At least there went some thought in that, and it's consistent. And I think the consistency part is important when you want to scale apps to huge scale.
Absolutely. I actually think a healthy amount of constraints really does foster creativity, which is a bit antithetical. Maybe like you would think, okay, more creativity, you need to be able to do whatever you want. No, actually, I think by putting some constraints in there, it at least focuses that field to say, okay, this is what I want to get done. And that can really foster creativity in terms of how are you going to work with those constraints. So with some of those opinions baked in. But also, we often talk about NX being really good for at the enterprise scale, which is like larger apps, bigger stuff, longer living cycles. But I also think NX is particularly good at spinning up prototypes and doing kind of like what you're talking about, because like all the stuff comes in out of the box. You can build solutions like B-Man's shown here. You can just take his and get immediately to full feature, all the niceties you would want in an enterprise app, but here in this small one. So.
I think it can easily save you 10 to 20 hours, and I'm not joking. I'm not saying that lightly. I've been there. And hey there, Chow is there. Awesome to see Chow. It really helped me speed up my cycles like tremendously. I started building a social network last weekend for a series I'm working on. And the first 8 hours, it was amazing what I achieved. And I was already like, after the first 5 minutes, or it's a bit longer, I guess, let's say 10 minutes of initial setup, because it needs to run all the schematics at a time. So it's not super fast to set up. But that's a nice hit to take if you see all the time to spend like building auth. And also for me as a content creator, I really like to have some sort of base level that I can just point people to. Hey, this is what I start as a base with, so you don't have to worry about it. I went over all the auth stuff and how I build it in big length in my series already, and I don't really feel it adds value. Explaining that again, I think it adds more value if I actually show you the tool that I've been using for the last half year, based on accumulated knowledge of using NX for years and building full stack apps for years, and doing this and one of the things I really wanted to get back from myself when I started doing professional software development, really as a daytime job, somewhere back in, I guess, 2009 or something, I was a big fan of Cake PHP. And Cake PHP is a Ruby on Rails-like framework, but then for PHP. And it has a huge, one of the huge driving things there is convention over configuration. So the idea is put a file in a certain location and it will be picked up by the framework and do stuff.
Right.
Now, NX and Node don't really allow this kind of stuff. I mean, I guess they could, but we need to build libraries. So it's just not one file anymore. We build a library. But then how in the constraints of NX, how can we do this stuff? And instead of getting a library where you normally, if you use plain NX, you do NX generate at narwhal/nest library maybe. I want to give you an option that generates 3 libraries for you: the data access, the feature, and the utility library if we're on the back end. And on the front end, I want to give you the feature and the UI library.
Yeah.
And I want to tag it right for you. And I want to load it up with code that you can look at and start tweaking. And this last part is something we've lost long ago, where I actually want to give you a full stack app that's tweakable and hackable. So in previous attempts where I try to fix the same issue, I spent 10 to 20 hours each time if I set up a project. I want to address that. My previous attempts would all hide it away in libraries. And this, I think, is why it never got to a success, because I hide it away in a library and then a client asks something specific and I'm not flexible. It's not hackable. So it's like a black box. And then you're up to like, okay, now re-implement all the stuff that the black box does. So it doesn't work.
Yeah. I actually remember, do you recall Jay Hipster? This was back when I was getting started, so around 2015 or so. Like this was
Java
kind of
starter,
popular.
right?
Yeah, so it was similar to what you described. It was Angular, I think, out of the box, and like Java Spring on the back end, I want to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was, and it set you up with auth and all these things. You could kind of like click a box when you started the the app, and it would get those in there. But then when you like what you were saying, if you want something that deviates from that pattern a little bit, you got to kind of like, it's almost like starting from scratch, you know.
Yeah.
Which I think where an approach like NX with generators really shines, because it's more like those generators can be more Lego blocks for to say, okay, here's let's add this piece on, let's add this piece on, rather than like building your thing out of yarn, where to undo
Yeah.
something you got to unravel all the rest of it. So yeah, the schema thing seems to me like a really promising way of going forward with this idea, because I think it's absolutely necessary, especially for people in the business of trying to get these prototypes up and running quickly, and getting to the point where you could say, okay, I'll build the schema, and those schemas essentially, correct me if I'm misunderstanding the idea here, but the schema being your instruction set almost for how to run those generators is how I imagine this working.
Yeah.
That could be very powerful, I think.
So we quickly discussed, we briefly discussed NxPM stack, so which is the full stack generator, and it comes with utilities to continue. And I guess this is the bridge to schema driven. So we now have a base setup that you're being able to generate. So it's dynamically generated for you. And this gives us some nice properties. Like one, and we might touch on that later, is you can actually on generation pick technology. So right now it's super opinionated: Prisma, Nest, GraphQL, Angular, and Ionic. But there's no reason that I wouldn't add like a native script support for the front end, or React Native, which has an official plugin. And I'm also dipping my toes into Go. I have the NX Go extension, and I would love to be Go plugin there. But yeah, we can generate full stack apps from scratch. And now what are we actually going to do with? And this is where schema-driven development comes in. And schema-driven is a concept that that I got introduced to by Michael, who is now somebody I work with. It's basically a client of my company. And Michael saw my project NxPM stack on GitHub, and he reached out if I didn't want to work with them. So that's already awesome stuff. Somebody watching there, even if you don't use NxPM stack, that's totally fine. Go put your stuff on GitHub. People will see it and they will reach out to you. Might reach out to you at some point. I'm not going to guarantee there, but this has been my biggest change in life, putting stuff out in the open. Now, this was not an exception. And what they introduced me to was like, okay, we wanted to go schema-driven first. So what we want to offer to the user is a no-code approach to start their app, where you can basically log in, start defining all your structure, and then run it through a bunch of generators, which is in essence set up the base NxPM stack and start running more generators to generate even more code. And it all magically will work. And I've been working on mostly the schema designer part. I don't have a demo ready, but it will be available at some point in the future. And basically go from that schema-driven approach, feed that into an NxPM stack, and have it generate the whole stack for you. So we want to give you the no-code approach when you start, and the benefit of the full code approach when you actually start coding. So somebody with a minimal knowledge of the domain, who in essence doesn't need to know any code, they can just go in and basically create the schema, click together the schema, push a button, and it will generate it for you. And then after that, there's where nice services come in, because you can say, you know what, give me your GitHub, authenticate with GitHub, and I'll push your repo for you, authenticate with Heroku, and I'll deploy it for you, authenticate with whatever service you think of, and we'll connect it up for you. And this is where you get to actually a more interesting approach, because I see these things as layers. So NxPM stack is like a base layer. Schema-driven is basically a convenience layer on top of it. You could imagine shipping a collection of these schemas and saying basically, hey, you want to have like an online store? That's fine. We have all the data models for you.
Yeah.
And when you said click driven development, it's popular, and there's a lot of people that actually want to think about it this way. There's a lot of people that understand databases enough to be dangerous, but they don't know all the commands or don't care about entering all these commands. And
figuring out, I think in general, how to make tech more accessible to people, getting that stuff out into the people with the ideas. And then just creating less friction for people to be able to try these things out. I think that's huge. Like going beyond just our world of tech into like the higher realms. That could be a big thing for a lot of people. So
yeah, I definitely also understand and recognize that NxPM stack, as the project is right now, is probably or possibly not the right fit for a lot of people watching this channel, because I think a lot of people watching this channel who are already like knees deep into NX, they probably have their own opinions. They might have their own starter kits or libraries that they're using, and they might very well not share my opinion about how to build these things. So, and that's fine. That's totally fine. I'm not here to address my peers. I'm not here to address people that are very similar to me. I try to address people that are very different to me. But basically, somebody starting out with NX, the biggest question, the first most asked question in the NX community Slack is how to structure my workspace. The same we see in the Angular Discord. NX first question is how to structure the thing. Second is how to import CSS.
Yeah,
they think it's like TypeScript.
Yeah,
it isn't. So these are two common things. The last one I don't have a solution for. I use Tailwind. I don't need any CSS.
nice.
What I do need is structure for my workspace. And for me,
Yeah.
it served me already super well to just have an example up there. Like, hey,
Yeah.
this is my today's opinion, and it might change in a week. Generate the latest stack, and you know what I want to suggest.
Yeah. Yeah, so speaking from the perspective of the core team, we for a lot of these things we want to remain unopinionated about some things. Like we want to be able to support any kind of structure to NX that you could want. That doesn't mean that like the stuff B-Man's doing doesn't have value. It absolutely does. Like in terms of getting the junior developer up. Like if I could take myself back several years and be like, well, how do I structure this? I'd be like, well, I don't know, just throw something against the wall and hope it sticks, and just iterate on that. But if you can see someone else who's thrown it against the wall and got something to stick, why not do that instead? So there's a lot of value in that. Also, just to latch on to something you were talking about before with put your stuff up on GitHub and do some promotion about it. If anyone's using NX for cool projects that they're doing that they have as open repos, make sure to let us know about it, because we'll do what we can to like promote that and showcase your work a little bit, because we're all about that. So
yeah. My project definitely got love from NX, which is always flattering, always cool to see. I mean. What would be even, and I hopefully that happens at some point, somebody actually using it on real life stuff. So with schema-driven, the eventual goal is, and we can consider ourselves done for a V1, is if schema-driven can generate itself, right? So it's a workspace generator, so we should be able to program it in such a way that it will at some point be able to self-generate. And this is not a super complicated goal, but there need to be a lot of things in place and need to be a lot of things correct to actually get to this. So it's kind of predictable how you're going to do it, but it takes quite a lot of elbow grease to get there. So we're working hard to make that a reality, and basically have that stuff being there. And so one of the things I must say, and I'm not sure how long we're going to continue to schema-driven, so this is why I want to point it out. The guys with schema-driven have been great to the project. They actually sponsored the Ionic integration. So it's one of the projects that allowed me this year to work on open source while still charging client hours for it, basically. And I was with Devin Shoemaker on my stream, and I dropped like, hey, I just need to find somebody who will sponsor me to do this. And then Michael came up and was like, yeah, we're good. We're the guys sponsoring that. Now go ahead and build it. So this is all super excited. If somebody wants to see stuff in NxPM and your company is willing to invest in that, reach out and we can probably make it happen. So if somebody wants to see React or Flutter or any of the, I guess, .NET in NX is a thing now. If this is what you want to see, reach out and I'll happily make it happen. There you go, the BLS episode with Devin.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any links you want to share for the friends that sponsored you?
So Schema-Driven, I think they don't have a public homepage by now.
Okay, that's
fine. If you search,
I just didn't want to neglect them if they're watching. Or
yeah. No, sorry, Michael, I didn't ask you about it, but I don't think they have a public website. I will share this stuff on my Twitter, by the way. So follow my Twitter handles right here and ask me out. And also, the people that work with Schema-Driven, they're always looking for talent. So if you consider yourself a talented, but above all motivated dev, and you like to work on these schema-driven tools, I can at least bring you in touch with these people, and they're always looking for qualified devs that they want to work on this stuff. So if you want to work on dev tools and schema-driven design sounds interesting, definitely reach out to me and I'll get you in touch.
Very, very cool. Thanks so much, Bram, for sharing this idea with us and for sharing the concept. To reiterate for anyone watching, if you have any questions in general about NX, feel free to ask in the comment section here, and we'll pull them up and answer as best we can. So Bram came on to talk about schema-driven workspaces. We've discussed that a little bit now. If there's any more you want, feel free to keep pushing it, B-Man. But otherwise, I'd love to take a look at NxPM here a little bit. It came up quite a bit when we were talking about schema-driven. Do you want me to share the website here?
Sure. Yeah.
Let's do it.
So this is the old website, or the current website, if you will. I'm working on a new version that actually talks about the stack. So right now, the only reference is this link here, which leads you to the GitHub page, because there's no official documentation yet. I did a video that talks about it, but that's about it. Now, if you click here, I guess you can click Get Started and see a few things. Now, what I was missing was a few things that NX had an opinion on. And I guess I started out with basically being a bit sad, like why isn't NX providing this? For instance, why isn't NX providing a solution for releasing libraries to NPM? But I understand by now. So this was kind of me. I don't know what drove it, but I was kind of like, man, why don't you do this? And then I realized this is so opinionated and so different for each and any setup and workspace. It's really hard to get right and to generalize. And this is where I started building the NxPM release command. I started building the NxPM projects. And this is a thing that probably a lot of people don't really know about. But if you run NxPM projects in your workspace, it will give you a list of all the projects defined in your workspace file. And it allows you to run generators and commands. So you can click it, run it, and then say, okay, remove this project or move this project to another thing. And NxPM plugins gives you a CLI, gives you basically an interactive way to browse the list of plugins, install these plugins, and run them as well. So if you take an empty NX workspace, you install NxPM, you can run NxPM plugins, install, for instance, the Go plugin, and run an app, all without actually knowing the commands. So this tries to be like a little small layer, interactive layer on top of the CLI.
Yeah. And with NX, are some things natively out of the NX CLI that can get you kind of close to some of these, like the so for NxPM projects, the way you describe it, it sounds like the way we've addressed that on the core team is kind of with the console plugin for VS Code.
Yep.
For people who are not in VS Code who prefer IntelliJ, there is the third-party plugin that's available, but this sounds like it could be a promising alternative for people who prefer like a CLI exclusive experience.
Yeah,
so that's very cool.
I definitely consider me to be a CLI guru. I've been like, my first computer didn't have a GUI, didn't have a mouse, and I still feel the scratch in my soul for not having a GUI. I'm a very terminal-driven, text-driven person. And when I see I think it was Angular console back then, and now it's like normal or an NX console. Super nice for onboarding. Yeah. That's not for me. This is not something I really identify with or really, I admire the effort. But actually the plugin logic that goes through your package.json and figures out the plugin. I stole it from, I guess I borrowed it from NX console.
Yeah, there you go. This is open source. There's no stealing. It's all just building on top of each other. There you go.
So yeah, this plugins thing was definitely something I wanted to exist. And there's one thing, and I'm just going to throw it out there. I think you should share your ideas and not keep hold of them. So actually, the reason why I picked NxPM, and on Twitter, the NX account got it right, NX Package Manager. Now, right now, it doesn't really manage packages. So the idea that I got here, and this is something I just need a week of concentration to build it out. You're in a workspace. Let's call this the donor workspace. And this is the donor workspace. You've set up stuff, and now you want to move a part to another workspace. Now, what do? What you typically would do is figure out which libraries you want to move over, then go to the new workspace, which is basically your target workspace, create all these libraries, copy over code into the libraries, and now you start searching and replacing, for instance, your NPM scope.
Right.
Now, this is a common thing, and those of you that work on larger projects, or those of you that work on very multiple similar projects, let's say you have an auth setup you want to share between two. Now you need to move these things away. And NxPM, the goal here is to have a NxPM copy command. I'm not sure if that's the name, but somehow you can point it to a workspace and you can say, hey, give me these and these and these libraries from these workspace, and basically migrate them to the other workspace by creating all the entries in your workspace config, creating all the entries in NX config, copying over the files, changing the NPM scope, and even doing a few imports. So you should be able to transplant, maybe is the thing I'm looking at, from one workspace to the other. And this is my basically the 0.1 goal that I have with NxPM CLI. It should be able to do this at some point. And then you can go fancy and like be interactive. Say, hey, just point it to workspace. Give me a drop down of all the packages, and do the depth graph thing where you can say, if you want this package, you also need to depend on these ones.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's really cool. Taking advantage of the depth graph to be able to do that. So we've been we've had feature requests for this for a while, being able to transplant from one NX workspace to another. These are kind of the concerns we come up against, is like, well, it's hard to do because if it's in the middle of a depth graph, you really need all the other things as well. Or you got to figure out how to read that from a registry instead, or something like that. So the NX generators for move and remove are huge. But again, that's only in the context of everything's in the same workspace. You just want to move it around in your file structure.
Yeah. So think about NX, think about the move command. It does a very similar thing, but it leaves the original. It transplants it to another workspace, plus it knows its depths. And this is, I guess, I mean, the move and remove are great, are awesome tools. These are really, really super helpful in making you fix past decisions easily, I guess. So you do something, you're not happy with it, and now you can, it's cheap to make changes. So this is super nice. Yeah. But it's still only one thing. For instance, remove will not work if you still use it. I guess you can override this, but it will by default block if you still use something. I would love to have a little bit of polish on top, and just, if it considers a conflict, just ask, hey, you want me to get rid of this thing? Because it knows where it's being used. So there's a few more, I guess, sugar on top that we could add. But having it go from one to another is something I haven't seen. I think we thought about it. Probably a lot of NX users thought about, or not a lot, but I guess more people thought about this being possible. I love to see this. And if nobody does it before me, so anybody that has the inspiration, go do it. Please go build it. So I don't have to build it myself. I just want to use this. If not, I'll build it at some point.
Yeah, you're capturing my ethos specifically. Go
do it, Zach. Go do it.
Yeah, there you go. I'm noticing a question here in chat for, is there a way to switch from NX to NGCLI in an existing workspace? I would like to switch it permanently to use the ng-add command. So there is using the CLI, you can always just use the ng CLI still. There is some things we do sometimes. I think this is opt-in. I'd have to review on this, but I believe is a way to override the ng command to alias it over to nx. That may be what the question's asking. Maybe you've already aliased it over. I believe there's ways to revert that back. I wonder if there's the task runner in your nx JSON file that I know you can switch between the cloud one and just the local task runner that way.
So I guess there's a few things. That's like one of the things that are interesting here is that NX CLI understands both Angular JSON and Workspace JSON, and it knows between the version 2 of Workspace JSON, whereas Angular CLI only knows Angular JSON, only supports the format 1. So if you have a workspace that's built by NX using Workspace JSON and it's a version 2, you basically have to convert it back so that ng CLI, Angular CLI, understands the workspace. And this was possible with NX up until NX 10. It was the same file, same structure, and then NX 11 introduced a new structure with new nomenclature where I guess a builder is now an executor and an architect is a target, I guess.
Yeah, so the big changes that came with 11 was we were starting to get ourselves away from the Angular dev kit.
Right.
And so that gave us the opportunity to think about renaming schematic and builder because we were never particularly happy with those naming choices. So going from schematic to generator and builder to executor seems like the better way of going across. Because are you really building when you're linting or when you're testing?
No, definitely.
That's kind of the idea there. So
yeah. No, I definitely agree. And so I'm actually a big proponent of the NX structure being more global. And I put a tweet out there 2 weeks back that got moderate attention where I suggested that the Angular CLI team should actually embrace NX and build their CLI offering on top of NX.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually still think it's a good idea. In fact, the more I think about it, the better I think, the more realistic I think this should be done. And I'd love to hear some opinion from the Angular team about this at some point, and basically explain to us why you're not doing this. Because the Angular team spends a lot of a lot of hours on maintaining a CLI they don't use internally. So this is an interesting thing. The reason the Angular team builds this CLI is not for internal use. So it's for the open source effort.
Mm-hmm.
Now they do a lot of work on the same way as the NX team, and doing the project layout by itself and scaffolding it all out. This is, I don't think, adding a whole lot of extra stuff to it. We've seen with the Angular team that they're getting more stuff out of the CLI than they get into. For better or worse, this is where they're going to. So now they don't provide a linter anymore. Protractor is going to leave.
Yeah.
So that's going to leave them without a test. And then you're going to ask yourself, now, what is the real advantage of using Angular CLI if you keep on removing stuff? How compelling is it to advise, if you start a new project, new team, new project, go build an app, why would you choose ng CLI, and why not start with NX directly and get a lot of benefits like build caching, like having the depth graph, like having a plugin ecosystem, like having the ability to, basically benefit from having an enterprise level structure and not a CLI that's basically morphed in a way that got like project support added, but it's like an afterthought. So it's a strong opinion. I don't want to sound bad to any of the people working on the Angular CLI. They do a great job, and they really changed my paradigm how to use software. Hans Larsen from the Angular team did a great job with building schematics and all the thought that went in there. So that's by no means my goal is to demotivate people to work on that or whatever. I think they should consider, though, to use NX. And actually, Jeff B. Cross was super supportive in supporting this, and which gets us to a situation where, hey, NX provides the base toolkit and Angular provides the official NX plugin for Angular. And then we all have one world where everything is good.
Yeah. I'd be interested too in just seeing the numbers. From my own perspective, I'm sure I'm I work at Gnarl, so obviously I'm biased, but I can't remember the last time I used a project with just the NG CLI. I'm curious how many people out there are still using it, just in general. But yeah, I think you definitely see a trend from the Angular team, and this was I think I remember this from the NGConf that happened last week, where, as you mentioned, they're getting rid of the linter out of the box. They're getting rid of an end-to-end solution out of the box with removing protractor. So
Yeah.
being able to using NX, just leaning on NX as a way to still have these things, that's a definite benefit for anyone out there. So yeah,
I think there's definitely something interesting in there.
Yeah,
I still kind of use it for really small prototypes and tests, but if it's any serious project, I'm going to move it away.
Yeah. As Lars points out, I'm in a bubble. Absolutely agree with that. I'm very biased on this. And Angular, the NGCLI is still the official tool, which means a lot of people will go to that. I think as people learn it, they're going to go to it too.
Now, also, I don't think the Angular team should offer any CLI. I don't think they should point to NX on how to do it. What I do think is that they should rethink and redesign the CLI so it uses everything that NX does and don't re-implement the same stuff. It will make life for us library authors way easier because I'm on the maintenance team of NG Tailwind. Chow and Vlad actually do all the hard work. There you go, Chow. They do all the hard work. But I do get to see the issues we run into, and there we were basically building two generators, and this is not because one is better than the other.
I remember that, and I was super grateful for Tailwind you're talking about, right? Because NX needed like specific configuration. That seemed like a second project, really, right?
Yeah, and now we basically have two generators, and we check if NX do this. If not NX, you're probably going to be in an Angular workspace, do this. It doesn't really add any benefits. Now, where the Angular team does add huge benefit, supporting Tailwind out of the box. So this is definitely something I'd love them to focus on, these kind of things, and have the actual project layout be done by an NX-ish thing. Basically, a little small wrapper over NX, I think, is what the Angular team should do, and still call it NG, and still have NG add, and still make sure that you don't break the trillion tutorials that are out there that tell you to NG generate something. That should all work.
Yeah. Well, interesting take. In many ways, I'm still very grateful to the Angular team and the work they do. And it would be nice if in some way they could be focused away from this. If we could free them up to not worry about the CLI, I think that could be a benefit there.
That's the thing, and or at least not a whole lot of the building blocks, and in fact start putting effort in organizing a few things, and leaning towards using NX components in their CLI. But it got into at some point even a heated discussion, people not agreeing, which to me sounds like a good idea. If you get strong opinions and people don't like it or they don't understand it, you might be onto something.
Yeah. Strong opinions are a good indicator. Like if someone's what was this? It was some book I read, but if you oh no, it was actually about Magic the Gathering, but they were talking about like which way do we want to take the game. It was like do you want to go with the one solution that everyone's kind of lukewarm about, or do you want to go with the solution that you got a lot of people who are super excited, a lot of people who just hate it, and that's where they ultimately look at. Anyways, I'll stop geeking out and come back to the conversation. Michael, I hope we were able to help you with your issue with Angular material. If you're finding it's still a problem, please open up an issue for us on our GitHub, and we'll take a look into that and see. We want to make sure, of course, we support adding Angular material out of the box for NX. That would be a priority for us. So if you're still seeing problems, reach out, and hopefully we can help you get it fixed and get it fixed for everyone out there. See another question here in the comments. Developing a project that involves Angular and Nest. Another awesome project. Open source. Very cool. Using the NX monorepo. depends on a Strapi project. Would you integrate Strapi in the monorepo as well? Y'all saw my screen as I was opening up a new tab. I was looking up what
What is
Strapi
Strapi?
was.
Yeah.
Looks like a CMS.
Yeah.
If
It's a
I'm
note and headless CMS. I think these days Strapi's been around for a while. Strapi's been around for like, I don't know, guess 4 or 5 years or something. And they've pivoted away, and currently they're into the headless CMS space. And yeah, it's been around 2015 actually. So, and I've considered it for quite a lot of my projects. I've looked at it at several occasions, and the last few times that I checked it, it was like, still using TypeScript, no, still using JavaScript, no TypeScript support. It's not interesting for me. However, it's a Node.js project, and you should be able to run it in an NX workspace. The big question is, what are you trying to achieve with integrating these two? So I think there's a few angles from which you can check it out. One is it's a headless CMS, use it as such. So deploy it independently, make sure you have some structure in there you're happy with, and connect it and basically consume it as if you would any other third-party headless CMS, like Contentful or Graph CMS. Or if you want to actually code against it on a more low-level thing, and if you actually want to include it in your code, I guess you can. I guess you can run it as an app, and I think you can set allow.js to true and your tsconfig and basically run JavaScript code in there. This is personally a path I'm not interested in taking, because then it's like, I might just use a TypeScript project from scratch. So I think these are the two things you could check into on how to do these. But if it's just a headless CMS, I'll probably consider it as a third-party tool and just host it somewhere in the cloud and try to run it. And I think, what Zack just shared, the run command executor, this basically allows you to run anything that you can type into the console.
Yeah. So this is potentially an interesting way of taking any tool. Again, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Strapi, but I was grepping through their website really quick. Looks like they have a CLI. So anything with the CLI, if there's a command to like serve this thing up or deploy it or what have you, just slap that thing into a command inside of our run commands executor, and like you'll be able to run NX run and then whatever you decide to call this, and kind of automate that stuff for you. You can bring then that command or this target into our run many executor as well if you want to run a bunch in SQL or parallel. There's some cool things you can do there for sure. So yeah, and interesting ways of incorporating Docker and whatnot this way as well. So yeah. Sorry, was there more you wanted to explain on that?
No, I guess that's about it. And in fact, so I did NX Go. I got contracted to a Go project, and it wasn't in NX. Now the team was actually NStudio team, the folks that run NativeScript by now.
Right.
It's about the NativeScript playground, and it was a big monolith, and it was like really the Angular app was tied into the front end and tied into the back end, and it was quite constrained environment. So we considered first step was to separate two, and then we're all big fans of NX. So when I suggested like, hey, I might be able to pull off an NX plugin for Go, we thought it was a good idea. It turned out it was. We've been running in production for months, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. Now, actually, we have two repos because the front end's built in Angular 7, and I didn't want to mix Angular versions into an NX monorepo. So we have separate monorepo for a separate NX workspace for the backend and the front end, and at some point they will merge back in.
Yeah.
But this was like Angular versioning getting in the way there. But building this NX Go was super straightforward. I think I got the meat of it out in 2 hours, and this is not because I'm super fast. This is because NX is super extensible. Yeah, NX.net, also interesting thing. I tweeted about it a few weeks ago.
So this is the really interesting thing. So we talk in NX about bringing in other languages. This has always been a goal for us to be able to say, you just have your repository. And if you're using Node, this is like very cool to be able to share resources back and forth and to be pointing at common interfaces and functions and stuff like that. But to be able to bring in a whole other language and be able to plug in with some of that stuff, you can absolutely do it. You can get like that. You can put that code in there. The interesting part comes when you have, if you want to support a dependency graph inside of that other language, you now need different parsing tools to be able to read those files to understand how the dependencies work within the those library nodes. Whereas we know that from Node already. That's easy enough. But going to Go, without it would take like some stuff in the plugin to be able to understand how those dependencies worked and bringing that all in. So
yeah, and this is a nice bridge to whatever I just before we went live I told you about. So James Henry, known in the community for a lot of his work around TypeScript and recently ESLint and ESLint Angular more specifically. Also, I think xNarwhal or slash Narwhal.
He still does some stuff with us,
So James, very knowledgeable dev, and he reached out to me, I guess Friday or Thursday, with a demo of doing depgraph in Go. So Angular Workspace, depgraph in Go, and they suggested like, hey, if this is something interesting for you, make sure to add it to NX Go, which I did, but it doesn't work. It's still too opinionated to work in any workspace. But he did show a nice way how to build this depth graph. So this is super nice. And I think, so you mentioned the run command executor that allows you to run any command, which is great, but you don't get a lot of these things like a dependency graph, because now it's just a command and it doesn't understand really what you're doing. So this worked well. You get stuff like build caching with this out of the box. So it's still smart. It will still save you cycles if you run the same thing over and over again. But it's not super intelligent.
It's not super intelligent, but like if you throw this on a lib for another language, it's not going to plug into that. But it'll still take advantage of effective if it's on like a JavaScript target. So this is still, it could be a solid choice for a lot of people who are just there in the JavaScript world like me. I'm bored. I just use Node.
I mean, and you should use boring technology. I mean, I'm a big fan. So I'll share with you the plugin that James did, and awesome. Actually Jason Jean also collaborated, and they both reached out to me in order to get this out here. I'll share it in private chat.
Very cool. Well, while you're sending me that, just wanted to highlight Chow's comment here too. Like, I definitely don't want to be interpreted as throwing shade on any of the stuff the Angular team did. The Angular CLI, especially when I was getting first started, it was like exactly the tool we wanted, exactly the tool we needed. And definitely huge props to them. In many ways, what the NX team has done is like just build on top of that and bring that to more environments. So
in fact, when I started with NX, so I think I'm actually, I was looking at the graph at some point. I'm the second person to ever start an NX repo after Jeff B. Cross, who is known for his self-starring, self-celebrating, I guess. Cheers, Jeff. But when I started out with NX, it was literally a plugin to install in your Angular workspace. So you needed to set up an Angular workspace, and then you would add I guess it was at narwhal/workspace or something, you would add it to your Angular CLI. NX wouldn't have been where it is right now if it wasn't for Angular CLI. I'm totally confident about it. They would probably have a way harder time to get it out there, but also sell us on the idea. Whereas now it was an easy sell because it's like, hey, it's your Angular CLI, and then we made it even better. And I think, Chow, I think we all share the same thing. None of us try to discredit Angular CLI. It's a great tool. It's been literally a game changer. And I think if they want to stay relevant with this tool for a few years back, they would do themselves and the community a favor if they start reusing things that NX does. Now, this is the project got shared by James. And so this is NX Workspace, and what they do, and you can actually show here in the workspace, Jason, how you use the command executor to actually support anything. So what they do is they have an executable here, first line 4 to line 18. This is your project. And then on line 10, yep. And then on line 10, you can see they have actually the run commands. So they basically, on line 14, they say, go build, and this is the thing. Now, this is kind of nice, and they just made it so that you can have 2 commands, 2 executables in Go, and they use a shared common library. So what you actually want to do at some point is figure out a dependency graph so you can get a graphical representation of how these things interact. And if you go back to the README, you can see a screenshot of what this dep graph does. So this dep graph, the both executables, they depend on one library. So nothing too fancy here. It's two applications with one library and how to do the dep graph. And then if you go into the tools, it's been implemented inside the workspace. And you can go into tools folder here, and you should see the project graph plugins. And then inside there, you see the Go project graph.js. And this is, I think, what Lars mentioned, the first plugin support project graph. This is the project graph API. And it's an implementation on how to use this thing. And so I actually initially misunderstood Jason and James' effort here, because I thought they wanted me to build this in. This is just an example on how you can do this. And actually on line 30, you run an executable in the native language, which actually should get the whole graph. And then this script here translates it to some shape that NX understands it. So yeah, it's Go. You use Go to run the metadata, and then you basically put that into NX so it can represent it in dep graph. So, and it's, I guess, in total maybe 50 to 100 lines of code in both Node and Go, and that's it. It's fairly
That's
easy
awesome
to implement. I could understand it first take round, and
very, very cool. Yeah, I'm super excited, especially for I don't use Go myself, but I hear lots of good things, and seeing this come in, and thinking of other possibilities like Python, .NET, other projects that are out there, and being able to leverage the dependency graph could be really cool. Now with Go, I understand things go really quick, so I don't know how much time you're saving, but
and actually
it's still a benefit.
It's like with the TypeScript ecosystem, and I guess JavaScript as a whole, you are pretty interested, I guess specifically with TypeScript, you're pretty interested in where these things are, which tsconfig applies to them. Whereas with Go, you have Go compiler, you say Go build, pointing to the Go file, and it will do the right thing for you. So it's a super minimal effort, which is the other, like basically the second reason I was able to pull it off very fast. One is NX is super extensible, and second is Go is very unopinionated on how you do stuff. If you have the Go command running, you point it at a file, it will build and compile. And it's blazing fast, so I never got the need to like do partial builds, for instance, which is what you generally use affected for, like only test the affected stuff. But Go is so fast, at least in the projects that I work on, it doesn't really ask me to fix this issue. But it's great that it's there, and it will be in NX Go hopefully end of next month when I pull out a new release.
Very, very cool. Yeah. So if you want to send me the link to your NX Go plugin too, I want to make sure people who do like Go, B-Man has a project he is supporting. I think we're still on 11 at the moment, right? So he's still 10 even. Okay.
But it will work with any NX version, and if not, that's an issue, and I will fix it for you. It should work. It's built using NX 10, and I need to upgrade it.
Yeah. But if you want to take a look, there you go. For anyone curious. And I'm sure B-Man will let us know if he gets that updated. And obviously, B-Man, thank you so much for your efforts in doing that and bringing more people in for that. I did notice there's a question here I want to get to real quick before we have to shut off. But Mohammed is asking about the whole NX system, React Next, and etc. our latest version on everything but TypeScript. Is there a reason sticking to 407 while 4.2 and 4.3 are out? I believe we're on 4.1. As Chow mentions, though, I don't think there's anything in your stack that's barred by your TS version. So you should be able to just update this in your package JSON yourself, and that should work. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all you need. If that doesn't work, please feel free to open up an issue and let us know about it. But it looks like you're all set. So there we go. We're at the hour mark. Everyone, thank you so much for coming by and saying hi. And yeah, B-Man, thanks for sharing all the cool stuff you're working on. And,
Thanks.
Yeah, it's been so cool to see the community come up around this stuff, you're building, and it was cool to be able to help you showcase some of all the neat stuff you're working on. And I'm looking forward to seeing more stuff about schema-driven workspaces as you guys get it out. Let's see if we actually do the click-driven development right.
Right. I hope so. Thanks a lot for giving me some airtime and giving me space to share my stuff. Super excited to have been here. And yeah, I'll follow me on Twitter, handles right here if you're interested in this stuff, and I'll definitely share any updates there. Also, come to the Angular Discord if you're not already there, discord.gg/Angular. We also have like an active Nx channel, so there's a lot of people interested in the same stuff, and we're always happy to receive new members.
Yeah. Just a quick shout out. B-Man you're a moderator on that Discord, I believe.
I'm actually co-founder, founded together with Steve in last day of August, and we're now at almost 9,000 member mark.
That's so awesome.
Yeah,
as I recall, I am joiner number 10. So.
Yeah, you're one of the OGs, as is Chow, as is Lars. A lot of usual suspects here.
Yep.
Yeah, we're 70. What is it? 77 short of 9,000 members. We see more than 1,000 members each week, and it's not only member count. We actually do have discussions there. It's actually pretty interesting, pretty vibrant community. So come hang around.
Yeah, awesome. For anyone who's new to the community, follow our Twitter. I just put it up here. I'll get we have a community-led Slack specifically for NX as well. Check out our community page on our website. Actually, let me throw that in there real quick. If you're interested in getting more involved, it's awesome to see stuff come around this. And B-Man, again, thanks so much. Thanks everyone for watching. We'll let y'all go now. Everyone enjoy your Monday, and thanks for hanging out with us.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye now.